Hey guys, V. Rigoni, Max, high performance real estate entrepreneur. So today we're talking cash flow and appreciation. Now, it isn't cash flow versus appreciation, but there are some times when there's a decision around wanting to accomplish one over the other. Well, that's at least in most people's heads. Now, for me, it's cash flow, baby. If you don't do cash flow, if you don't have the right cash flow, you're sunk. So let's talk about that. But before we do that, hey, you know what? Let's smash the like button. Let's subscribe to the channel. Let's leave some comments. Hey, I don't care. Some criticisms. I'm good with that. But by the time you get to my age, you hear a lot of shit. So it doesn't really matter. So when you're looking at real estate, you've got this, especially now, interest rates have moved up, right? We keep talking about that. It is like the only thing you ever hear about real estate is where are the freaking interest rates? Because interest rates, they just have a very, very huge either benefit, okay, or they're a huge negative to your cash flow. And what do I mean by that? Well, cash flow is the money that's coming into your property, whether through the rents, okay, through parking fees, or through your laundry services, your machines, whatever. All money coming in is the money coming, you got the revenue. Then you have your expenses. That's all of your expenses from your heat bill, your light bill, electric bill. You got your expenses for taxes, for landscaping, for snow plowing if you're in the north, whatever. Just your general maintenance. It all gets broken down into expenses. So the money going in and the money going out, that is what cash flow is. Now, whether it's a positive cash flow, a neutral cash flow, or a negative, that's a different story. So before we go there, let's talk about appreciation. Now, there's the basic concept of appreciation, right? Why do you want to invest in property? Well, because you want cash flow, but you also want appreciation. You want that property value to go up. If it doesn't go up, what's the good of it on some level? And so you're looking to either, there's some ways around pushing appreciation. Your general appreciation is just considered the movement of the price from one year to the next based upon inflation, based upon the natural movement of rents going up or going down. So if rents continue to go up and at the same time your expenses stay relatively the same, you'll then have appreciation on a multifamily building. Now, when it comes to a residential building, it's just based upon what's going on in the neighborhood, how well you keep your house, if the amenities in your home are newer or older. In other words, has the kitchen been remodeled, the bathroom been remodeled, that kind of thing. That's then how inflation affects the values of that. And then that creates an increase in the value of the property. It's called appreciation. All right, really just two basic concepts. Now, just as in cash flow, you can also have negative, in a sense, it's kind of like, it really doesn't work where you say negative appreciation, but you actually can have it really actually depreciate as a value, not just a paper loss, but a real value. So there's appreciation, there's depreciation. So now let's compare the two and what's the most important and how do we get to where we want to go? Well, whenever you buy a piece of property, you have to deal with the day-to-day, right? Yeah, we all want to get rich. We all want to see that property value double. We all want all these wonderful things to happen. But if you can't pay the bills today, then what the hell? And you do that through cash flow. You do that through the money walking in the door, and you do that by then taking those dollars and paying all your bills, all right, and then paying your mortgage, and then what's left over, as we said, is your cash flow. Now, is it positive? Because that's what it's been now for the last 10 years, up until they started raising interest rates. People have had nothing but, in most cases, extremely positive cash flows. And why? Well, because they had low interest rates. They had 2.5% on single family homes. And if you went to multifamily, you were doing that at 3.5%, 4%, and you could do that at fixed rates. And your rents were going up for all those good reasons. All right. And so your cash flow, it was probably the best it's been, I don't know, in a century. You go back 100 freaking years. because we never saw the kind of interest rates that we've seen. There were never 2.5% interest rates. And so when you have those kind of interest rates and then you apply just the normal rent increases, you then had a maximization of cash flow. And that's what people have been living with all for the last, up to the last 2 years. So from 2010 all the way through to 2021, they've been buying properties with maximum cash flow. Now, how did they screw some of that up? Well, they could refinance that property, right? After they fixed it up, raised the rents, the property then appreciated. All right. And so you get that appreciation. Now, if you then refinance that property and you pulled a lot of money out of that property and you replace that debt with adjustable rate debt, well, you could be really screwed right now because you're seeing that go up. We've talked about that. But the heart and soul of any investment is the cash flow. And it's just not, in reality, it's the positive cash flow. We always think about cash flow as automatically as being positive, but that's not always the case. A lot of times you can have a situation where because of taxes going up or because of rents declining, you could end up in a situation in which you have negative cash flow, let alone the fact if you put the wrong kind of financing on the property and then you put an adjustable rate mortgage in order to buy a piece of property to make it work, and then the interest rates go up. And so then what happens to your adjustable rate mortgage? It goes up. And now you're like, oh my God, it just went from a positive cash flow to a negative cash flow. And what happens when you got a negative cash flow? Well, you're pulling the money out of your pocket, baby. You're pulling that money out of your pocket. And are you doing that once? No, you're doing that month after month after month because you think your rents just jump up automatically to cover the fact that you put the wrong kind of financing on the property or you paid too much for the property. That's where a lot of people are finding themselves right now today. It's just the way life is. But that's situational. This conversation is also about just the idea around cash flow. You should always be looking at the cash flow. Now, there are people that'll tell me out there all day long that they lose money in California on their cash flow every day. But then their appreciation goes through the roof and they make a ton of money. Well, congratulations. Hey, and the same thing was happening in Austin, Texas. They're paying twice of what the house was worth, what the building was worth several years ago. And so, yeah, their cash flow was running kind of negative, but they were making so much money on the appreciation. And I get that. But you know what? That's when greed steps into the investment picture. Because if that's what you're thinking about, is your appreciation, then you are setting yourself up for failure. You're setting yourself up for the disaster that will eventually come. Because in all investments, okay, whether you're talking about the stock market, the bond market, real estate market, just businesses in general, there are ups and there are downs. There's things that we have no control over. There are parts of the economy, the macroeconomic economy, you can't deal with that in the sense of have any effect on it. And so these are the things that will then choke you to death if all you're concerned about is appreciation. And I'll tell you, there'll be a line of people standing up there saying, hey, I've got rich off of just appreciation, even though I ran a negative cash flow. Wonderful. Hope you sold. Because the problem is when the tide turns and things change, okay, and the macro takes over, now that's when you're screwed. That's when you're in trouble. It's like when the tide goes, you never hear when they have the tsunami. It seems like the water recedes first. And when the water recedes, you see all the crap along the shoreline and where the water was before. And then comes the tsunami, the big wave that knocks everybody over. And that's what happens when you just are concerned with appreciation. It'll look really good for a while. You'll think, oh my God, look, let's run out there and let's grab those seashells. And then comes the big wave and you're done. And it happens, okay? It actually does happen in a tsunami where people will literally run out and try to pick up seashells because the water's gone instead of running their asses in a different direction and trying to get to the highest point. And because the big wave comes and then they're just swept away. Well, don't get swept away on your real estate investment. Do not just invest for appreciation. Now, what is What is the opposite of not investing for appreciation? Well, investing in very low rent areas, investing in areas that are difficult, investing in areas where you got to bring a gun to collect the rent. Let's just get real. So if you got to bring a gun to collect your rent, then what you're going to get is maximum cash flow and no appreciation. The best you can hope for is that you bought it someplace where it'll eventually get gentrified and then you'll clean up that way. But outside of that, you're not going anywhere if your cash flow is based upon buying in an area in which you'll get a high cap rate, okay, you'll get a lot of rent, but you're going to have to carry a gun to collect it, and you're not going to get any appreciation because that's just the neighborhood you're in, the area you're in, the location you're in. And so, there are stories out there, okay? There are many, many stories of people that thought, oh, I'm going to go buy in this area that is just sitting there where I get these rents and the buildings are so cheap, and then I'll just collect the rents. That's great. Except understand when you go to sell that property, you won't get any appreciation for it or very little. So again, there's always an exception to the rule, right? So what I'm telling you is always be investing for cash flow. Now, where are we at today? Well, we are at a challenging point in the real estate, right? What I've been telling you is don't be buying real estate today. Now, I know there's gurus out there all day long telling you to buy. They always tell you to buy. They always tell you to buy. That's BS. There's a cycle. Buy at the right time of the cycle. Am I telling you to time the market? No, this is not a stock. Real estate's slow to go up, slow to roll over, slow to go down, and it's slow to base out to get back up again. So it gives you plenty of opportunity. And so if you're buying a piece of property right now, you're paying top dollar for it, right? Now, maybe it's worth more in 5 years from now. I would assume it would be, all right? But you're also going to be paying 8% to 9 to 10% interest rates based upon the kind of property it is. Why is that? Because residential 30-year loans have hit 8%. So what do you think that does to your cash flow? If your mortgage payment has doubled, okay, your cash flow has gone down the drain. So we went from a time where we just 18 months ago, 2 years ago, we had maximum positive cash flow opportunities. Now we have the worst possible cash flow opportunities out there. Now, how do you get around that? Well, you can put more money down, right? You put more money down. That means that, you have less loan. If you have less loan, you have less mortgage obligation. But is that always the best way to go? And do you always have, 30 or 40% to put down? Now, according to banks right now, on especially commercial loans, they're not lending you more than 50 to 55% loan to value. So they're not giving you the opportunity. All right. But in single family homes, if you want to buy those for rentals, there's going to come a time where that cash flow starts to get back into line because rates will start to drop. When they start to drop, there'll still be opportunities to buy properties, right? And you might see them at a little bit lower price, as we've talked about before. Then get in there and start buying. But while they're still raising rates, while you've got an 8% mortgage rate, it gets more and more difficult. Now, the Fed is done raising interest rates. When we move through the recession that's coming, somewhere within that recession is when you're going to want to start to buy property. And you're going to say to me, but Vic, the rates will still be high. The cash flow won't be the best. I get it. At that point in time, you're still going to want to have positive cash flow. You're not going to have on a single family house, on a $200,000 house, you're not going to have a $800 a month positive cash flow. It might be $200. But what will happen is that you've now bought the property 2/3 of the way through that recession. And then as the interest rates start to come down, a year from now, 2 years from now, you can refinance to a lower rate. That's where you take advantage of that. Just don't run out now because people are telling you, oh, go buy a house now. The cash flow will suck, but you'll own the house. And isn't that a wonderful thing? You'll own that house. And then at the same time, you're going to get the appreciation. Well, what if the house price goes down in value? Because the recession goes longer. Do you know how long this recession that we're going to head into now? It's supposed to head into in the first quarter of next year. Do you know if it's going to be a 6-month recession or a whole year recession? I don't. If I go based upon what happened in the 80s, it's going to be longer than people are expecting. So then do you want to sit there and struggle with a piece of property where your cash flow is the minimum? There's no appreciation. In fact, there's depreciation in value just because people are telling you, buy. Well, that's stupid. Don't be stupid. Understand, there's cash flow, there's appreciation. Can you give up a little bit of cash flow for appreciation? Absolutely. But do you go negative or neutral just for appreciation? Absolutely not, especially in this economy, especially what's going on right now in a major inflationary period, which we seem to be coming away from that inflationary period. But if we were in the beginning of that inflationary period, there's an argument for buying for appreciation, but it's still better be able to cash flow. Because how deep are your pockets? How much do you want to take out of other investments? How much do you want to take out of your income in order to pay for a negative cash flowing building? I know I don't want to take a dime out. So I would rather just make the decision the right way, move forward the right way, understand that in the world of real estate, cash flow is king. They always say cash is king. But those are always temporary moments where they tell you to accumulate money so you can go buy a bargain later on. But in real estate, every single day of your life, if you own a piece of property, cash flow is king. It is the first, it is the second, and it's the third thing that you should be looking at when it comes to buying a piece of property, because it will also already encompass location. It'll already encompass the kind of financing you're putting on the property. It'll already encompass the rent and the rent growth. That's what an analysis of cash flow will do. It'll take all those things already into consideration. So when I say that cash flow is the number one, the number two, and the number three thing to buying real estate, it's because it's already taking into account. So think about what I've been saying here. If you disagree with me, hey, throw me a comment. For you guys out there that are just investing for appreciation, because if you're buying today and the only thing you're thinking about is appreciation, you're in trouble. If the people you're listening to, if they're only talking about appreciation, you're listening to the wrong people, because what keeps you in the building is positive cash flow. When hard times come, and let me tell you, the hard times always come. There is never there's never an extended period of good time. It runs a cycle, and the longest you can usually get out of a cycle is 8 to 10, sometimes 11 years. But then eventually it will roll over. Like all these guys that were out there pulling out all their equity in the last couple of years, and they were replacing that equity. They were replacing that appreciation in their property values with debt. Now, if they replaced it with fixed rate debt, shouldn't be a problem. But if they bought a great property, they forced up the appreciation by fixing up the buildings. They got the rents higher. Then they got the value up higher. And then they went out and then they pulled out the money. They pulled out equity to go buy another building, which is not a problem. It's all part of the process. But if then they replaced the debt they had with hard money, or they replaced that debt with adjustable rate debt, they took a great opportunity, took a great building, and now they're screwed. It's no different than back in 08, in 05, 06, when you saw people in your neighborhood that had owned homes, for 20 years while you grew up. And then all of a sudden you saw their house was in foreclosure. And you're like, why? Well, it's because they had pulled out the equity of their home, the appreciated value. Then they replaced it with an adjustable rate mortgage. And then when those interest rates on that adjustable rate mortgage skyrocketed, then they lost their house. So even though they owned it for 20 years, you would have thought they had all this equity. No, they took it out and spent it. And they replaced it with bad debt. Now, that's really the way this ball rolls. And the same thing is happening now in multifamily. So understand, you can be just a homeowner and you can create a bad cash flow situation for yourself. Because as a homeowner, how do you pay the mortgage? It comes out of your income. Is your income go up because the interest rates go up? No. So when those interest rates skyrocketed in 07, 08, and those people could no longer afford those houses, they couldn't go back to their employer and say, I need you to pay me more because my interest rate went up. Nobody cares at that point. You put the financing on the property, you got to live with it. So make sure that when you're financing a piece of property, that the number one thing you're thinking about is what is the cash flow? Will the financing create a positive cash flow effect, a neutral or a negative. And that's really the bottom line. I don't want you to get screwed up in what's going on. I don't want you to fumble the ball since we're in football season. Don't be that guy. Don't be that woman. Let's get out there. Let's make it happen. Let's think cash flow, cash flow, cash flow, because that is what will keep you in that property. That is what will make you a successful landlord for the long term. Remember, think big, start now, and grow fast. V. Rigoni, Max, high performance real estate entrepreneur.